2013 draws to a close. I want to thank you for listening to Democracy Now's podcast, the secret shows and news sources committed to the truth. Whether you want to know more about the U.S. government spying programs or civilians killed by drones, or you're concerned about human rights issues from immigration to incarceration to solitary confinement, or focused on climate change, you deserve a news source that'll shine the spotlight of the global media on the most important issues of the day. One of the ways Democracy Now! Is different is that we don't take money from corporate advertisers. We rely on donations from listeners like you to pay for this podcast. Your tax-deductible donation covers the bandwidth, the news production, and every aspect of it. Your support makes it possible, keeps it free, so that everyone can access the vital news and information that has an impact on your lives. Make a tax-deductible donation to Democracy Now! Or donate in honor of someone you know. We'll let them know you decided to think outside of stores and give the gift of independent media. Oh, and you can give great gifts to your friends and families, like t-shirts, tote bags, fair trade coffee, mugs, and so much more. We'll sign books, autograph books for you. All the proceeds go directly to Democracy Now! We need your support today to keep bringing you the hard-hitting, in-depth reporting that you've come to expect. Visit democracynow.org or call 888-999-3877. That's 888-999-3877 to make your holiday gift to Democracy Now! Today. And thank you so much for listening. From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
A child born today will grow up with no conception of privacy at all. They'll never know what it means to have a private moment to themselves, an unrecorded, unanalyzed thought. And that's a problem, because privacy matters. Privacy is what allows us to determine who we are and who we want to be.
As a federal judge upholds the NSA's phone records collection program exposed by Edward Snowden, new details emerge about how a secretive NSA unit hacks into computers around the world. Sometimes the NSA even intercepts computers purchased online in order to place spyware on them before the customer receives them. We'll speak to journalists Glenn Greenwald and Jamil Jaffer of the ACLU.
There is a broader pattern here in which the courts are abdicating their role under our constitutional system. They are supposed to be ensuring that the government's national security policies are consistent with the Constitution. Instead, what's happening is many of these challenges are being thrown out at the threshold.
Then, despite long-term unemployment being at its highest level since World War II, 1.3 million Americans have just lost their unemployment benefits. We'll look at why. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Opposition activists are claiming over 500 people have died in weeks of Syrian government airstrikes on the city of Aleppo. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says the dead includes 151 children. Syrian government helicopters have been hitting Aleppo with highly destructive barrel bombs, oil drums filled with explosives, and sometimes with nails or scrap metal. At least 25 people were reportedly killed Saturday when government forces bombed a vegetable market. Meanwhile, the Assad regime has evacuated thousands of residents from the town of Adra amidst heavy clashes with rebel fighters. At least 31 people have died in 2 consecutive days of bombings in the Russian city of Volgograd. 17 people were killed and 34 wounded on Sunday when a female suicide bomber hit a train station. Another 14 people were killed earlier today when a bomber hit a packed bus. No group has claimed responsibility, but Russia has faced repeated attacks from Islamist militants in Chechnya and North Caucasus. Russia is set to host the Winter Olympics in just over a month. Aid workers are warning of a humanitarian crisis amid sectarian violence in the Central African Republic. The local coordinator of Doctors Without Borders says over 100,000 people have now sought shelter at one camp for the displaced in the capital, Bangui.
réhabilitation, ça fait 3 semaines qu'elle est là.
For 3 weeks now, these people haven't received any other assistance but health assistance from Doctors Without Borders and water from the Red Cross. There are no toilets, water's not sufficient, there's no food distribution, no distribution of shelter. So there's so much to do. And first of all, we have to improve the situation with the hygiene as soon as possible before the situation becomes catastrophic. With 100,000 people in such a small place, it's an emergency. We must do something quickly.
African leaders have set a deadline of Tuesday for talks between the South Sudanese government and rebel fighters. More than 1,000 people have died and tens of thousands have been displaced in over 2 weeks of fighting between government forces and rebels loyal to the country's ousted former vice president. At a summit in Kenya, Ethiopia's foreign minister read a statement on behalf of regional countries supporting South Sudanese President Salva Kiir.
Welcome the commitment by the government of the Republic of South Sudan to an immediate cessation of hostilities and called upon Dr. Riek Machar and other parties to make similar commitments. 3. Determine that if hostilities do not cease within 4 days of this communique, the summit will consider taking further measures, condemns all unconstitutional actions to challenge the constitutional order, democracy and the rule of law, and in particularly condemns changing the democratic government of the Republic of South Sudan through the use of force.
That's Ethiopia's Foreign Minister Tedros Adhanom. A federal judge has upheld the National Security Agency's bulk collection of U.S. telephone data just days after a separate court reached an opposite opinion. On Friday, District Judge William Pauley dismissed a lawsuit from the American Civil Liberties Union challenging the NSA's mass collection of U.S. phone records. Pauley said telephone metadata could have potentially prevented the 9/11 attacks by alerting the government to hijackers who made phone calls from the United States. The issue will likely head to the Supreme Court. Pauley's ruling comes less than 2 weeks after another federal judge questioned the program's constitutionality and described the bulk collection as almost Orwellian. The German publication Der Spiegel has revealed new details about a secretive hacking unit inside the NSA called the Office of Tailored Access Operations, or TAO. The unit was created in 1997 to hack into global communications traffic. Hackers inside the TAO have developed a way to break into computers running Microsoft Windows by gaining passive access to machines when users report program crashes to Microsoft. With help from the CIA and FBI, the NSA has the ability to intercept computers and other electronic accessories purchased online in order to secretly insert spyware and components that can provide backdoor access for spies. We'll have more on the NSA news later after headlines. Jobless benefits have expired for over 1.3 million Americans after Congress failed to renew them under the recent budget deal. The program provided up to 47 weeks of supplemental unemployment insurance payments to jobless people looking for work. Just a quarter of unemployed Americans will now receive jobless benefits, the smallest proportion in half a century. We'll have more on this story later in the broadcast. The White House says nearly 2 million people have signed up for health insurance plans through the federal and state exchanges in the first 3 months of enrollment. Over 1.1 million signed up through the federal website, healthcare.gov, including over 975,000 in December. Egypt is facing continued violence and unrest amidst the latest escalation of the military government's crackdown on the Muslim Brotherhood. On Sunday, 4 soldiers were wounded when a bomb struck a military building north of Cairo. A bombing last week prompted the Egyptian government to deem the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization, even though a separate militant group claimed responsibility. 1 person was killed and over 100 were detained over the weekend in student protests against the anti-Brotherhood crackdown. Buildings on the Al-Azhar campus were set on fire during the unrest. Egypt is set to hold a referendum on a new constitution next month. Egyptian forces, meanwhile, have arrested 4 journalists with the news network Al Jazeera in Cairo. Correspondent Peter Gress, producers Mohammed Fahmy and Bahar Mohammed, and cameraman Mohammed Falzi were detained at their hotel on Sunday. Al Jazeera is calling for their immediate release. Egypt's military government has repeatedly targeted quoted Al Jazeera raiding offices, ordering an affiliate's closure, and deporting several staffers. Lebanon is receiving $3 billion in aid from Saudi Arabia. The Lebanese government says the money will go to its military. It's the largest ever grant for Lebanon's armed forces. The announcement follows Friday's bombing in Beirut that killed 5 people, including former Minister Mohammed Chatta, a critic of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad and the Lebanese group Hezbollah. A health worker overseeing a polio vaccination effort in Pakistan has been shot dead. The victim was the latest medical official to be killed in the fallout from the U.S. assassination of Osama bin Laden. The Taliban began attacking health workers after it was revealed the CIA used a fake vaccination program to help locate Osama bin Laden. A new U.S. intelligence estimate warns Afghanistan will likely descend into chaos unless the two sides can sign a long-term agreement to maintain American troops. Afghan President Hamid Karzai has delayed ratification of a security pact that would keep U.S. forces in Afghanistan after 2014. The National Intelligence Estimate says U.S. gains will be eroded within 3 years without a large military presence to fight the Taliban. Thousands of people have rallied on the Japanese island of Okinawa in protest of plans to relocate a U.S. military base. Local officials signed on to a deal last week that will move the base from a densely populated urban area to a more remote location. But a movement of Okinawa residents has opposed the base altogether and pushed for ousting U.S. forces off the island, citing environmental concerns and sexual assaults by U.S. soldiers on local residents. On Friday, thousands of people surrounded a government building and staged a sit-in inside. A new investigation challenges right-wing claims around the deadly attack on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi. That was in Libya last year. The New York Times reports there's no evidence Al-Qaeda or other international militants played a role in the assault that killed 4 Americans, including Ambassador Christopher Stevens. The attack was coordinated by local militia who in fact benefited from the U.S.-backed NATO intervention against Colonel Muammar Gaddafi. It also appears that anger over an anti-Islam film produced in the U.S. called The Innocence of Muslims helped fuel the attack, as the Obama administration had initially claimed. Protests are continuing in New York City over incoming Mayor Bill de Blasio's appointment of William Bratton as the next police commissioner. Bratton returns to the job after leading the NYPD in the mid-1990s when he embraced a controversial strategy of cracking down on low-level offenses. De Blasio campaigned on a promise to curb the NYPD's controversial stop-and-frisk policy, but Bratton actually expanded the program while heading the Los Angeles police. On Friday, the parents of victims shot dead by police under Bratton's watch led a protest march from Harlem to the Bronx. Nicholas Hayward Sr. lost his 13-year-old son after police mistook the boy's toy rifle for a real gun.
I'm angry today. That Bill de Blasio has chosen Bill Bratton to be the next police commissioner again. You see, back in 1994, my son was murdered, and he was gunned down by a New York City police officer. Whether it was housing or just a city officer, you should have addressed that issue. But he failed to do that. This protest is, you got parents and families out here who had their innocent loved ones that were killed. That's what we're talking about. We do not wish for William Bratton to be the police commissioner of New York City again.
Organizers say they plan to continue protests at de Blasio's inauguration on Wednesday. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We turn now to one of the biggest stories of 2013, the National Security Agency and its massive domestic and international surveillance apparatus. The German publication Der Spiegel has revealed new details about a secretive hacking unit inside the NSA called the Office of Tailored Access Operations. The unit was created in 1997 to hack into global communications traffic. The Der Spiegel report includes a number of new details about the NSA's hacking abilities. Hackers inside the secretive unit have developed a way to break into computers running Microsoft Windows by gaining passive access to machines when users report program crashes to Microsoft. With help from the CIA and FBI, The NSA has the ability to intercept computers and other electronic accessories purchased online in order to secretly insert spyware and components that can provide backdoor access for the intelligence agencies. In one secret operation called White Tamale, the NSA hacked into the communications of Mexico's Secretariat of Public Security. These revelations were published just 2 days after a federal judge dismissed a lawsuit filed by the American Civil Liberties Union challenging the NSA's mass collection of U.S. phone records. U.S. District Judge William Pauley wrote, quote, "This blunt tool only works because it collects everything. Technology allowed Al-Qaeda to operate decentralized and plot international terrorist attacks remotely. The bulk telephony metadata collection program represents the government's counterpunch," he wrote. The issue will likely head to the Supreme Court. Earlier this month, another federal judge questioned the program's constitutionality and described it as almost Orwellian. We're joined today by two guests. Here in New York, Jamil Jaffer, Deputy Legal Director of the ACLU and Director of the ACLU Center for Democracy. And joining us from Brazil is Glenn Greenwald, the journalist who first broke the story about Edward Snowden. He was previously a columnist at the Guardian newspaper and is creating a new media venture with Laura Poitras, Jeremy Scahill, and eBay founder Pierre Omidyar. We're going to begin right here with Jamil Jaffer. Jamil, talk about the judge's ruling. What exactly did he rule?
Sure. Well, it's a ruling that is limited to the bulk surveillance of metadata, telephony metadata. So, as you know, there's a program that the NSA has had in place now for 7 years at least, that collects information about every single phone call made or received on a U.S. telephone network. So that means every time you pick up the phone, the NSA is making a note in some sense of who you called, how long you spoke to them, when you called them, every single time you pick up the phone. And the NSA is doing that with respect to every single phone call made in the United States. So we challenge the constitutionality of that program, and the judge, Judge Pauley here in the Southern District of New York, upheld the program, saying first that Congress had intended to prevent people like us, that is, the targets of this kind of surveillance, from challenging this kind of program in court, and also that the Constitution doesn't foreclose the government from collecting this kind of information about everybody. Obviously, we disagree strongly with the decision. We think that it's wrong in multiple respects, and we intend to appeal it.
Explain exactly who you represented in this lawsuit.
So we represent the ACLU. I mean, obviously, I work